How's it going, guys? Dustin here at the Range St. Louis West, and today we're going to talk about handguns. We're going to talk about some of the basic line parts on handguns so that you know the functionality of your firearm that you just purchased. Everything on the table is nice and safe. All of our firearms are nice and empty. We're using snap caps. All of our magazines are nice and empty, so everything is nice and safe. It's always a good idea to be safe with our firearms. Now, the first one we're going to talk about is semi-automatics. Semi-automatics mean one trigger pull, one shot fired. And they come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes, from very compact guns to full-size guns. So whatever you got, we're going to talk about them. Now, your firearm might be in a different caliber, make, model, and also might be in a different functionality. Single action striker fire, double action only, double action single action. It might have safeties to it. It might have mechanical safeties, passive safeties. It might have no safeties. We're going to skip all of that for right now. We'll just talk about the baseline parts that are on every single semi-automatic out there. So starting at the top, working our way down, we have a front sight, we have a back sight. Those sit on top of the slide. The slide is what moves back and forth, loading and unloading the firearm. Inside the slide, we have our barrel. All of that sits on top of the frame of the gun. That's the grip where we're holding on to it. Now, the first button we need to know is in between the slide and the frame, and that is the slide stop. So the slide stop has really two functionalities. So if I push up constantly with my thumb and I pull the slide back, it's going to lock the slide to the rear. We might have to do this for a few reasons. Number one, to visually check or physically check to make sure it's empty. We also can lock the slide to the rear to take the gun apart. We might also have to lock the slide to the rear to clear a jam or malfunction. And when we have an empty magazine on the last shot fired, the slide is going to lock back, telling you, hey, you're empty, time to reload. Now, if I push down on the slide stop, that's going to release the slide forward and it's going to go drop forward. Now, from the slide stop moving down, we have the trigger guard, and behind that is the trigger. Behind the trigger is the magazine release. So the magazine release, if we hit it with our dominant thumb, we hit it with our support thumb, doesn't matter. As soon as we push the button, the magazine release is going to release the magazine from the firearm itself. So those are the baseline parts that are on every single semi-automatic out there. Front sight, back sight, slide, barrel, the frame, slide stop, trigger guard, trigger. So that is the semi-automatic. Moving on to the revolvers. So revolvers have a lot of similarities in the semi-automatics and in the revolver world, but there are some differences, so we want to pay attention to those. Yes, revolvers do have a front sight. They do have a rear sight. Now that might be cut down into the frame, so it might be a little bit harder to see, but they still do have a front sight and a rear sight. They do have a barrel. They still have a frame, trigger guard, and trigger. Now some of the different parts that are on revolvers would be the cylinder release. Now depending on your revolver manufacturer, the cylinder release might move forward, it might move back, or it might push in. Now just because we push the cylinder release, we still have to push the cylinder out. This is the cylinder. That's where ammunition is going to be loaded in. We also have the ejection rod. So if I push the ejection rod, that is going to pull those little claws out. That's going to pull the casings out of the cylinder itself. So a lot of similarities between the revolvers and the semi-automatics, but there are some differences. So we do want to take note of those. All right, guys, so that was the baseline parts on both semi-automatic and revolvers. We go into more detail in the private lessons and classes that we offer. For more information on that, go to therangeSTL.com, click on that training tab. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.